Hi, everyone, and welcome to this month's Idea Cafe. We're really excited that you could join us today. My name is Brianna Berkowitz. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator at American Public Gardens Association. I'm going to turn it over to today's facilitator, Aaron.
Thank you, Brianna. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Aaron Sibert, and my pronouns are he, him. I am the Director of Inclusion at the Morton Arboretum, and I'm coming to you from Tinley Park, just outside of Chicago. We were in the middle of a beautiful, cool fall day. And I'm excited to facilitate today's Idea Cafe, which is on engaging diverse communities. It's sponsored by the Idea Center in partnership with the association's Idea Committee. If you're interested in hosting or facilitating the Idea Cafe topic, we invite you to reach out to the committee. There's so much work being done in this space, and your stories and experiences are worth sharing. All of our experiences can help one another learn more about the amazing work we are all doing. And Idea Cafe topics are a launching point for further discussion and represent the experiences and perspectives of today's panelists. We hope you'll engage your curiosity to explore and continue them within your organizations. The goal here is to build a community of courageous conversations and create transformation one conversation at a time. Speaking of conversations, today's cafe will begin with one between myself and the panelists. Don't worry, we are ensuring there's plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. So please save your questions until the end, but if you have one you don't want to forget, type it into the chat and Nicole will be monitoring throughout the cafe. Today's topic, again, is engaging diverse communities. It's a very important one because for public gardens who are serious about diversifying their organizations becoming places of belonging for all, we really need to learn from one another and hear stories about what works and what doesn't work. And this is not a simple process. It takes hard work, dedication, patience, and sincerity. Now, I'm excited to introduce our panelists today who come from Denver Botanic Garden, Des Moines Botanical Garden, Naples Botanical Garden, and Cornell Botanic Gardens. If each panelist can please introduce yourselves with your name, title, garden name, and a little something fun, your favorite part of the fall, or even, if you're in Florida, I know it's a little warmer, so you don't have the fall, but favorite part of the fall maybe you've ever experienced or would like to experience. So if we could start with Kim, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Perez. I serve as the president and CEO here at the Greater Des Moines Botanical Garden, where it is 63 and sunny out today. We're loving this fall weather, starting to see some of the color changes and things like that. My favorite season of the year.
Thank you, Kim. Surbhi?
Hi, I am Surbhi Kamboj. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a second generation Indian American, and I'm the assistant manager of community relations at Denver Botanic Garden. Favorite part of fall are the outfits. I love a cozy cardigan before it gets too chilly and you need some more serious gear.
Great, thank you. Britt.
Hi, I'm Britt Patterson-Weber. I am the Vice President of Education and Interpretation at Naples Botanical Garden in Naples, Florida. And my favorite part of fall is that it signals that we're almost at the end of hurricane season. So that's what I look forward to.
Thank you, Britt. And Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Fiorello. I'm here at Cornell Botanic Gardens in Ithaca, New York. Fall's really starting to happen. I love the changes of the color. I'm looking out the window because it's all around, we're all surrounded by beauty in our gardens. I have to say that my favorite thing about fall is any opportunity to bake with pumpkin spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, you name it. I just made some pumpkin muffins and they lasted like an hour in my house. And I think I forgot to mention that my position here at Cornell Botanic Gardens is interpretation coordinator. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone. So today we want to center the conversation around programming that our panelists have been working on and that provide you with real world examples. We're not going to shy away from what didn't work. We will go beyond discussing just the positives. We'll look at the negative and talk about the missteps, because this is really where the real learning happens. But don't worry, there's a lot of positives to discuss as well. So now on to the discussion. Can each panelist please give a brief background on a program that you've worked on? And we'll speak about more in depth in your answers. Sarah, if we can start with you, please.
Sarah, you're on mute.
I apologize for that. I forgot to unmute. Okay, so I'd just like to share real briefly an interpretive exhibit that we created at our garden that's in its second season, and a lot of programming is happening around it. We call it Seeds of Survival and Celebration, Plants in the Black Experience. And like I mentioned, we're in our second season this year, and I'm going to share a little bit about the scope of the program. And so around our Welcome Center, we have over 75 different plants that are significant to the Black experience dating in the Americas, dating back to the transatlantic slave trade. Plants are displayed in front of our Welcome Center. They're also displayed in our vegetable garden, just like a quick walk from our Welcome Center. And our main interpretive message in displaying these plants is really emphasizing that the knowledge, skill, and resilience of enslaved people from West Africa enabled them to continue their cultural traditions under the duress of being kidnapped and enslaved, and how these traditions are today woven into the rich cultural fabric in the Americas. And the way we do this is through labels in front of all of our plants provide a short little interpretive narrative, some of which are accompanied by a QR code where you can scan to listen to a short narrative narrated by one of our collaborators. We have an interpretive exhibit within the lobby space of our Welcome Center that provides historical context and shows, how plants prepared, how food plants prepared by enslaved people became part of the food culture in the Americas today. Like, for example, how grits came to be. The lobby space also includes a series of panels that they're portraits that really share people both locally and on a national scale who are elevating and safeguarding the rich heritage associated with the plants displayed in our gardens. And we call this the cultivators of celebration. And so real briefly, most of the plants are located in our nearby vegetable garden, and they're organized by 4 main stories that we're sharing. And the first is plants that were stocked on slave ships to be used as provisions, and how they made their way to the gardens around the living quarters of enslaved people, who then grew them and used them to continue their cultural traditions. Some of these plants include okra, taro, rice, sorghum, and many others. Additionally, we're also showcasing plants that were accessible to enslaved people for the first time in the Americas and were often used as substitutes for plants that they no longer had access to, like collard greens shown here, sweet potatoes, and corn. Enslaved people and their descendants continue their tradition of holistic healing through the practice of herbal medicine. And in the garden shown here, we show that enslaved Africans and their descendants created their own repertoire of medicinal plants using the knowledge that they brought with them from West Africa and the plants they had access into in the Americas. And this became the birth of African-American herbal medicine that's practiced to this day. The last thing I want to say is that this exhibit could not happen without working with an advisory group that we engage with off the bat to both plan and create and execute this exhibit. And I'll be talking more about that in the Q&A. So thank you very much for your time and listening to me.
Thank you, Sarah. Britt, you can go next, please.
Hi, thank you, everyone. So the program I'm going to talk a little bit about today is our 2022-23 annual programming and exhibits theme, which was Mexico, a celebration of plants and culture. There is a much bigger slide deck about this program that's available. If you're in the IDEA Center for Public Gardens, we were a part of that inaugural cohort. So we have a presentation about this, and you can certainly reach out to me for it. But just to go back a little bit further in time, our founders of Naples Botanical Garden designed our garden with the idea of transporting visitors to different lands. But until this point, we had never celebrated plants through the lens of culture. And then at the same time, our visitor demographics for many years did not reflect those of the community, which is 29% Hispanic or Latino. And just under half of the students in our school district speak Spanish as their first language at home. So our seasonal exhibition plan inspired the theme, and then our exhibits themselves, they're selected because they have a clear connection to horticulture and they allow visitors to gain a deeper understanding of plants. So the reason to celebrate plants of Mexico were numerous. As the crow flies from Naples, Florida, it's in Southwest Florida. As the crow flies, we are closer to the Yucatan Peninsula than we are to some cities in the Panhandle of Florida. So plants of Mexico are already well represented in our collection because they do well here. And then, of course, Mexico has a rich flora worth celebrating, just being the birthplace of some of the most important agricultural crops, as well as being home to megadiversity. So while we are the experts on plants and know how to talk about plants, we're not necessarily the experts on culture. So when we started planning for the season of Mexico, we reached out to key advisors, including the Mexican consulate, as well as local leaders. And they provided feedback on our plans and also helped share our plans or programming with their constituents. So then what followed over the next year was a new festival, as well as exhibits throughout the year and new programming. And we also affirmed our commitment to multilingual signage and materials throughout the year. And interestingly, our plans inspired our local county government to launch a community-wide celebration of Hispanic arts and culture that is now an annual event. As far as the outcome for the garden after this year of programming, an important note is that we had already been taking steps to expand access to the garden. So our Hispanic audience remained essentially the same as the previous year, but that audience share is now the same as what's in the census data. And it's also larger than who visits comparable area attractions. But anecdotally, we certainly heard from guests about the impact of seeing their culture reflected in our programming and our exhibits. There was one guest who thanked us for the beauty, dignity, and joy that our Dia de los Muertos event brought her family. And then others commented on our authenticity. And ultimately, I would say that we succeeded in connecting with people with plants in a novel and meaningful way. And that Dia de los Muertos event too, that was actually not one that we brought to our advisors, but they asked us, they said, there's no one is celebrating this on our coast, and thought that it would fit really well with our year. And so we've made that an annual event, although our theme this year for our programming and exhibits is not culturally or regionally focused, but we still thought that that was a really important celebration to make it part of our regular offerings. So I would say our biggest achievement with this year might be demonstrating authentically that we are a garden for all.
Awesome. Thank you, Britt. Surbhi.
So today I'm going to be speaking about our flagship accessibility program, the Clinton Family Fund Go-To Garden Free Shuttle Program, which I may refer to informally as the Free Shuttle Program because it's quite the mouthful. But in short, through a grant provided by the Clinton Family Fund, we provide free transportation, admission, and programs for groups to visit the garden. Through this program, we've created a network of 146 community partners who are organizations and individuals that are actively engaging with those in our community. And some examples of the kind of organizations that we work with are nonprofits that provide services, cultural and community centers. We also work with a lot of care facilities and even government organizations such as employment agencies or housing services. Our goal is to improve community access to the garden by removing barriers that people may experience, which I'll elaborate more on later in our discussion.
Great. Thank you, Surbhi. And Kim?
Thank you. Like Surbhi, I'm going to share some information about programming that we've put in place to reduce access barriers to the botanical garden. We call that grouping of programs our pineapple programs. Pineapples, we know, are supposed to be very welcoming, and that's kind of where that name came from. Like so many other public gardens, we've been participating in programs like Museums for All for quite some time, making free admission available to those who qualify. We also offer 4 different community days each year where admission is free. And we participate in the Iowa Library's Adventure Pass program, through which library patrons are able to check out family passes to receive admission for 4 during general admission hours. In 2022, we started asking some different questions of our team members and about the experiences that we were observing at our admissions desk and within the garden with members of our community and other visitors who were coming to the Botanical Garden. We decided, as a result of asking some different questions, that we would expand these initiatives beyond simply general admission and free general admission. And for those families who would demonstrate their free admission through Museums for All, for instance, if they were Iowa residents, we made the decision to extend full membership benefits to those families, good for a year, so that they didn't have to display that benefits card each time they came for general admission. The other opportunity that created for us was the opportunity to deepen engagement with a community that we didn't feel engaged with well. And, really, again, extend those membership benefits, creating opportunities for us to communicate with them in all the different ways that organizations communicate with their members, to share other benefits and information about things that they might not know about, and see what would be possible through that. By making move from simply general admission being accessible to membership benefits being accessible, we actually found that we were able to create a much more dignified experience for our guests. Their behavior, their gratitude, right? Their depth of willingness to engage with us changed very significantly as a result of making these memberships available. Within the first year, we extended roughly 250 Pineapple memberships to members of our community. And so I'm happy to share more as the afternoon goes on.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So let's get started. Let's get started with some of these questions. Britt, the first question is for you. When did your organization first realize a need for deeper community engagement?
So an important note about Naples Botanical Garden, we are the youngest organization on this panel. So our garden only opened in 2009. So we've been building the plane as we've been flying it. And first we needed to get an audience, any audience, before we started thinking about strategic community engagement. But in 2018, after we'd been open for almost 9 years, we worked with a consulting company to conduct formal audience research. And that research confirmed with data what we all felt to be true with our eyes, is that our audience composition did not reflect the community. And at that time, our mission statement included the word everyone, as in we aim to engage and inspire everyone to care for the plants around them. But we weren't anywhere close to reaching everyone. So over the next year, then we took steps to rectify that, which included launching a suite of access opportunities, much like you've just heard from Des Moines there, one of those being a friends and family membership program. And that kept growing, and we called that whole umbrella of opportunities Garden for All. And we launched those opportunities in partnership with local agencies like United Way and other agencies that serve the audiences that weren't yet visiting. And so for us, it was important to, again, start taking down barriers before we start. I don't think our year of Mexico would have been as successful had we not started by tearing down those barriers first and showing that we are welcoming of everybody in our community.
Great. Thank you, Britt. I'd like to follow up that first question with another one for you. Does your organization have an IDA or DEI plan? And in addition to that, is there someone who's in charge, such as a director, a manager, a leader, to oversee that plan?
So we had launched an IDEA staff committee not too long before the onset of the pandemic, with me at the helm as the IDEA champion. And we had a somewhat cross-departmental. We had a relatively good participation, I think, from other departments, representative of other departments, but it was really quickly apparent that the scope of work was way too large to do on top of the rest of my very full-time job. And we also may not have been ready for such an initiative yet as an institution. For example, being a young organization, we are still developing internal processes, and developing an IDEA plan, while incredibly important, might be beyond where were capable of at the moment. And then the pandemic started, and then just everything kind of went out the window. And it was also apparent too that we needed more education, which we certainly obtained through participating in the IDEA Center for Public Gardens over the last year. But to plan for the year of celebrating Mexico plants and culture, we did assemble an interdepartmental task force that was much bigger than our original IDEA staff, and that truly had representation from every department on property. So Café, ticketing, facilities. We had never done anything like this before. We'd never planned a year of exhibits and programming quite this cohesive before either. It really helped both bring everyone along in the process of developing a well-rounded theme and related messaging, but then also give a lot more opportunity for voices to be heard that don't typically get to be heard when you're planning things like community outreach and festivals. I'm probably not talking to the Café staff as much as I should be. And so that was important. We started that a year before we launched our programming theme.
Great. Thank you, Britt. What about in Denver? What do you have an organization-wide plan, and do you have someone who oversees that?
So my answer is yes and no. We don't have a specific idea plan, but idea initiatives are interwoven throughout our institution's strategic plan, and it's reinforced through our mission and values. So we also don't have a sole employee which is responsible for this work. And what that means exactly is that the ownership kind of lives within all the departments, and it informs all parts of how we operate. So no matter what we're doing, we're continuously asking ourselves, like, does this program represent our community? Is there anyone missing from the table, from this conversation that we should be inviting to the table? Last year, we added an idea-related self-reflection question as a part of our employee self-evaluations, which really encourages people to reflect on how they're contributing to our organization's idea initiatives. And it also provides a little bit of encouragement, I think, for those who may not work in the idea space to participate in trainings and programs that they may not have thought to get involved in before. We do also have a lot other opportunities for involvement through a board idea committee and a staff idea committee. And also Denver Botanic Gardens is the host of the Idea Center for Public Gardens. So we're championing this work on a couple of different levels within the public garden space, within our board and staff, and also just within daily operations.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both. Kim, thank you for being here today. How do we ensure that we pursue our idea or DEI goals for the right reasons?
Well, I think it's a really important question. I'll start by sharing that I, like others, have had the opportunity to participate in that first cohort of the Idea Center last year. And one of the most impactful takeaways from that experience was really understanding through a different lens the importance of knowing why you're doing what you're doing, even if it's something that you're doing that's super tiny or small. Chances are that there's several different reasons for your why, right? Several different competing factors. And I'll just give you a handful of examples that, I've encountered in my career, right? You want to do good work for your community. You want to build relationships where they don't or haven't existed already. You want to welcome diverse groups. You want to demonstrate to your staff and community that their voices matter. You want to satisfy funders' requirements so that you can get your foot in the door. These are all valid reasons, but they're all very different in terms of why you're doing what you're doing and how that why influences your actions. Being clear about that, staying objective about your why, what's driving your current planning, your current actions, helps, in my experience, you be effective in understanding and taking those next steps. In the work for the pineapple programs that I talked about, we were already welcoming people from a general admission perspective and reducing those access barriers. our why through observation and through asking different questions became, how do we create a more comfortable, welcoming, dignified experience for someone when they're coming into the botanical garden? How do we address the fact that our team members are observing, maybe a bit of embarrassment or shame if they're sharing an EBT card as their vehicle for getting through the doors? How do we address that? Bridging our program into full membership benefits created an opportunity where those guests then had a membership card to show, just like everybody else, or just like so many others, right? And so the why we're doing what we're doing might feel very small, but it can be even more impactful when you apply your decision-making specific to that why.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Sarah, good to see you. And question for you is, as we perform community engagement, we do more outreach into communities, how does that help lead us to meeting some idea goals that we may have in institutions or personally?
Yeah, well, when I thought of that question, I thought of an example of some programming that has been the result of the exhibit that I shared earlier today. And the way I can articulate it is, if you're expanding the range of people with different backgrounds who visit and engage with your organization, you then have the opportunity for, once you're able to engage with them, asking those audiences, how do they want to engage with the garden and how would they benefit from the experience? So an example, to make it a little bit more concrete, would be that we had an opening for the part of the exhibit I shared with you, where we're featuring people who are really advocating for the ideas that we're communicating through our plant exhibit. And 4 of the people we were featuring came to the opening, and one was a local herbalist who's really continuing to share and expand the knowledge of African American herbal medicine. And one was a woman who's a local farmer who's really advocating for more people of color purchasing farmland and being part of the farming culture, both locally and nationally. And having them all in the same room together, really engaging with us about how happy they were that we created this exhibit, and creating a space where people from the community can come in and discuss these issues, has now led to the suggestion of having a program where there's a community dinner in which people from the local community can come to the gardens, and make it an annual tradition where they can engage with the plants that many of them eat in different celebrations or gatherings in their life, and having that be a way we can bring the community together. So it was very much initiated by people in the local community who wanted to have a community event to celebrate this part of their culture. So that's in real time a way, just bringing people together and talking about what would serve them. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, Sarah. So as we see this work and we're trying to make it, help this work grow at our institutions, official community engagement plans or frameworks are important. But what I've seen is one of the most important things is really beginning by just being open and honest about what we're trying to do. So if we go into diverse communities and community members don't feel that we're thinking about long-term engagement, then we're doing the communities a disservice and we're setting ourselves up for failure. So if we're looking at something, sometimes you'll see a institution get a grant. Well, they wrote the grant before they talked to the community. They go to the community and say, hey, we've got this grant, we've got money, we've got 18 months to spend it, but this is what you have to spend it on. Well, the immediate response or first thought someone's going to think is, well, why didn't you engage us beforehand? So while this framework is imperative, it demonstrates the goals for the work, our community engagement efforts really must be infused with honesty to ensure that long-term success. And one way we can show this is a commitment through a process of co-creation. So we can't create programs that we think communities will like or need and then expect them just to flock to us. And if they don't work, we start to think, well, see, people don't want to come here and diverse communities don't want to come here because we put this program on and nobody came. Well, I'm sure many of us have worked long and hard to create a program. I know I have. for diverse communities, and then nobody showed up. It didn't succeed. And I started to think, what did I do wrong? So we really have to look at this model of co-creation where we listen to communities first and foremost and let that guide us. So Sarah, can you please tell us about a co-creation model that you follow when you're working with your community partners?
Sure. The last slide that I shared with you when I introduced the interpretive display we have up this year was a group of both students at Cornell faculty, and Cornell staff that we had a relationship with, all who have some lived experience around using the plants that we've displayed through their everyday lives or through like their family celebrations. So we came to them at the very, very beginning. We said, we have this very loose idea of wanting to create an exhibit that really celebrates plants that are significant to Black culture in America. And that's huge. That's many different things to many different people. And of course, it would need to be narrowed down, but we engaged with a group to say, what stories do you feel like would resonate with you, and what are appropriate ways to share those ideas, and through what lens, because there are many different lenses in which you can interpret that. And so we didn't want to take up too much of their time. We want to be respectful of, working with them in a very mutually beneficial way. And so we engaged them at the very beginning of the planning process and came up with a set of goals for what we want people who engage with the exhibit to walk away with understanding, feeling, or wanting to do from their experience engaging with our exhibit or the programs around it. And once those were in place and everyone was on the same page with like the goals of the exhibit, we engaged them in the key points in the planning process. It helped us to focus in on what content we want to develop and what plants we would select to communicate that content. And then at each step in that process, we would bring them back and we would celebrate and eat good food, and they would give us some feedback. And so the bottom line of my little spiel there was just to say, engage with people in the community right from the beginning so you can understand what they would want, or they can connect with other people in the community so that feedback can be shared.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Surbhi, how did you go about co-creating with partners in Denver?
So our program, all of the programs that we run through Shuttle Program are created with involvement from partners. Our program specifically is centered around removing barriers. So immediately we start with asking, what do you need? And we're really fortunate that our grant was centered around the barrier of transportation, but we don't have restrictions on how we can use those funds. So some examples of accommodations that we make are scheduling programs on weekends and evenings, which tends to be when most working people are available. If childcare is identified as a barrier, we provide it. So if we're doing a bilingual yoga activity for moms, we will simultaneously get staff to facilitate a second program for little ones to keep them busy so mom can have some alone time. If a group requests it, we provide wheelchair accessible transportation, and we've even worked with medical transport companies in some instances in order to just be able to get folks to the garden. A lot of time too, the nonprofits that we work with don't have a physical location. So it doesn't make sense for us to send a charter vehicle. And we're really fortunate that our grant allows us to purchase lift credit so people can be picked up right at their home. A lot of, those are kind of spending restrictions in a lot of other organizations. So being able to offer those credits is huge. For individuals that speak a language other than English, we can pay for interpreters for the program. And we also do offsite programs. So we'll go to their locations themselves and do a program there. Sometimes to the simplest form of engagement, just like free passes, is the most effective depending on what organization you're working with. One of my favorite ways that those are used are by the Mental Health Center of Denver. The free passes that we provide to them, they share with counselors who then bring clients to the gardens for therapy sessions. And I think that in itself really speaks to this environment that we've created, that like the gardens is a safe space for you. And sometimes that's not enough for organizations, and they need those other accommodations like the transportation and childcare. So you really have to work with them and see what they need, and make sure that you're also creating programming that is of interest to diverse audiences, because you can have all of these accommodations made, but no one would show up if they don't know what to expect or how to navigate that space. So it's really only through co-creation that you're able to reach new audiences and create meaningful connections within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Surbhi and Sarah. So as we see, community engagement really has to be a two-way street. It's not just us going out and saying what we can do. It's also learning what can we learn, what can community members give to us. There's so much wealth of information, because we often think of ourselves, I think, as the experts in much of our work. But this perspective can also make us look arrogant when we are reaching out to community members. We go out and expect community members to know who we are. And many times they have no clue who we are. And then we're left wondering, okay, what do I do now? Now I have to explain even what we're about and what we do. So really, it's important that we center the perspectives and expertise of diverse communities in a mutually beneficial way while we plan, co-create, and engage communities. So Sarah, can you please talk about how this co-creation, how has that increased and strengthened your community engagement?
Yeah. When we started this specific plant exhibit, we knew that, it would require collaboration, but I had no idea that it would turn into what I keep calling, I keep using my hands like this because I keep calling it the ripple effect of how the original group that we engaged with to co-create the exhibit, really had personal ownership over helping to develop it. And they in turn, advocated for people to come not only visit the exhibit, but engage in the programs that we offered, or else co-sponsored programming. One of our advisory group members is the director of the Africana Center Library, and we've been doing some lectures and other programs over his purview. So I go like this because I keep saying the ripple effect, because our advocates then shared their enthusiasm for the programs with other community groups. I was aware that there's a lot of people of color really involved in growing plants and farming, but not aware to the extent of really how much traction there is in our community around those efforts. And so now those community partners introduced us to other community partners, and it just keeps increasing exponentially how many people we've been able to engage with and really get together and think of thoughtful collaborations that we can continue into the future. So it strengthened community engagement even more than I ever anticipated. And now we just have a whole list of people we're really excited to continue to reach out to. I'm just going to give another concrete example that we're bringing in a lecturer named Kola Talkin, whom is she has a podcast called Black in the Garden. She asked us if for her lecture, she wants it to do more engaged model of almost having it be like a game show, in a sense of asking panelists a bunch of questions. So she said, do you think you could find, someone of color in the community who's a farmer? Do you think you can find someone who's like a scholar on this subject? And because of all these in recent new relationships we've formed with so many people in our community focused around the variety of, work being done in this arena, I said, yeah, we have like 3 people we can call for that. And so now our new relationships we've been building, now we can call upon them to say, hey, do you want to engage with us with this fun event we're having? So it's just been overwhelming and exciting how many new relationships that come through with this that are now going to lead to even more programming that we can continue to welcome new people in our community to be engaged with. So the ripple effect, that's all I have to say.
Very cool. I like that. Britt, can I ask you, when we had talked initially, we were talking about the programming that you had done in collaboration with the community, and you mentioned about the increase that you'd seen just around the gardens of the Latino community. And what does that look like now after you've worked and created this program together? What what is the, in general, that look like as far as who's coming out now to the garden?
There's just a greater awareness that we're here, and that this is a place, like a good place to go. Once, and that's what I always say is like the hardest part is getting people to come to the garden. Getting them to come back is not that hard. And so I think there's just a lot more people, and we have had people ask, oh, when are you doing, are you doing Dia de los Muertos again? Like what weekend is it going to be? And then like looking at our other festivals. So our visitation, like I said, we are now matching census data for our MSA, and that's really positive. But we just also have some different relationships too with some community groups, like the performers who came for some of our events last year. They're coming for some of our other events, and so they were getting a bigger audience too. So it's just been just a real win-win for everybody.
All right, thank you. Kim, could you also speak to similarly with the pineapple programs and those memberships? What is that? Have you tracked those numbers to see how often are people using those, and is it something that you see now people coming back? And I know we're doing most of the Q&A at the end, but if you could talk to, one of the questions I saw was, is this something that you've talked about people being able to renew after that initial year, what that looks like?
We have. We planned this from the beginning with the opportunity to renew. And so, the membership guidelines, if you will, really are staying true to the Museums for All program. So if that household a year later still is receiving the benefits that make them eligible for Museums for All members or general admission, then they still qualify for the pineapple membership. Right. And so they would renew just like every other one of our members would renew each year and choose which membership level works for them and all those details. So we did plan that. Now we are kind of right now in that first membership renewal period. Remember, I said we launched this in 2022. So it's a little too early to know what our retention rates are going to be, what our renewal rates are going to be, et cetera. But those are things that we are tracking and looking forward to being able to report back. Other people have talked about sometimes the hardest thing, I think Britt said it really well, the hardest thing is to get people to come to the garden for the first time. We want them to come to the garden and see that there might be something for them here, whether it's because they have a knowledge and love for plants or because they want a family-friendly environment to, enjoy their children, or whether they want a warm place to go in the cold of a central Iowa winter, right? And so there's lots of those different reasons. We don't know enough about the pineapple membership program per se to know if there is a driver. And so we are still very focused on making sure that we're communicating to those community organizations who are already in relationship with the populations that would be eligible for Museums for All programming, to make sure that they are aware of what we have to offer. We are, I think, of the belief, like so many other organizations, that we don't need to be everything to everyone. So how do we develop the relationships with the organizations that are already in relationship with those individuals we're trying to reach, and offer to say, we've got information we think your clients, your constituents, your stakeholders would benefit from knowing about. Our only ask is that you share it, and that's it. And then we wait and see what happens. I think that speaks to some of the arrogance, right, that you mentioned, Aron, that we're not trying to be arrogant and assume that they want to know it. We simply want to share information that we want to make sure everybody has access to.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kim. And it's funny when you say that, but the escape from the winters. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and I grew up just less than a mile from Old Brick Gardens, and that was a place where my mom would always take us, and we weren't charged to get in, and we didn't have much. So it was a place that we could go. And I guess, my mom being from Mexico, I think it was nice for her because it was a little, not just warmer, but a little more humid too. So she always loved to go and visit. Following up, just a quick question, Kim, for that program, what have you seen as far as increases of engagement, as far as not just holders of this membership coming, but increased participation in some of your programming?
Well, when we extend full membership benefits, some of those benefits include things like discounts for classes and, discounts for summer camp for children and simply information about different things. I want to be clear, I can't necessarily correlate all of this data because we're not as sophisticated as we hope to be in the future. But one of the things that we have seen is a significant increase in the number of families coming to the Botanical Garden, to the extent that we now are opening just next week our first ever outdoor children's focused area here at the Botanical Garden, and our cafe that's on site has added a children's menu. So we've got some tangible data points to know that there's a difference just within we'll say since the pandemic, things have shifted pretty significantly in that we've needed to change and some of the decisions that we've made and that give us, frankly, some reasons to do some things that we've talked about for a much longer period of time.
Great. Thank you, Kim. So Sarah, I'd like to follow up just on these questions. When we talk about work with communities, how do we ensure that we are authentically representing those communities that we're reaching out to and making, trying to do good and not harm?
Yeah, I just want to kind of re-emphasize just that inviting communities to be part of the co-creation process. I think I remember when we first, there's many reasons why we decided to focus on plants and the Black experience. We had just recently changed our name from Cornell Plantations to Cornell Botanic Gardens. And so just even though we're in the middle of New York State, is still an off-putting name. Even if it doesn't allude to actual plantations, it still has that stigma attached with it. So just our name itself was, I feel, and data shows it, just a barrier to a lot of people of color to want to just even come to visit our gardens. We don't have any staff members currently who live that experience. And so we knew that we couldn't authentically create a garden if we didn't engage people whom have connections with the plants and the histories behind the plants. And so off the bat, we reached out to people who did and asked if they could be part of the co-creation process. I think that whenever we do any culturally focused programs, we try to reach out to people who have cultural connections and can share them or guide us into how we can create authentic programs. I really feel like that needs to be part of the process.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. All right, Surbhi. One of the harder questions now. We talked about a lot of the positive, but can you talk to us about some of the missteps that may have happened or some of the things that you had to maybe learn during this engagement process?
Yeah, so we had a lot of initial challenges promotion of our program. Unsurprisingly, people were weary about putting their families on a mysterious vehicle, going to a mysterious destination, which, hindsight is like, oh, of course. But, if you've never had the opportunity to visit a public garden, you may not know what to expect and that it's something that your family would enjoy, and it's worth getting everyone up and out of the house on a weekend. So the connection piece is really important. And after our initial programs weren't so well attended, we asked for support from our board members, which we knew were very connected within the community, and found that made all of the difference. Once participants knew someone that was connected with us, we saw an increase in participation. Another challenge that we run into frequently is bandwidth. And as I'm sure many folks in the nonprofit world know, you wear a lot of different hats. So the person at the assisted living facility that I'm communicating with to schedule a program for them is probably also involved in resident care and is like trying to dispense medication. So even though the people may really want to come for a visit, they can't do that unless they know about it. And so we realized we had to develop kind of a promotional toolkit as well for these organizations they had the resources they needed in order to help promote the program itself. We've also had to make a lot of adjustments to our process to get confirmations much further in advance so that we could cancel vehicle bookings and be refunded for what we paid in case we had to cancel programs. And prior to all of this, we were kind of operating under the assumption that if we thought of all of these things and we had this plan that people would show up, but we're still learning. And even 8 years in, I consider myself pretty self-aware, but even most recently, I was working with a group that provides services for teens experiencing homelessness. And I very excitedly sent over some program options that I thought they would enjoy and was quickly schooled on trauma-informed programming. And to recognize was that everything that I had sent over was involved bringing things home, which understandably can be very triggering for people who are experiencing homelessness. And because I had taken the time to develop a relationship with this organization, they were very willing to provide me with the background and resources I needed in order to facilitate a better program for their group. And it's an opportunity that we wouldn't have had if we just stopped at transportation or even just admission, and we're operating under the assumption that one size can fit all.
All right, thank you. Yeah, very important. And that point you make, very important too, that if you hadn't taken that time to build that relationship, it could have been a relationship that just went away and they may not have said anything, but they felt comfortable to tell you that. So we all understand a little too well that the criticism, especially online, if someone's behind their keyboard, but that comes a little quicker than the praise may. Britt, can you speak to how you've responded to any of the criticism you may have received in this process?
Yeah, so that was a real bummer. Just some really rude things were said. I remember one very long, very racist voicemail. And, that person did not get a call back, because what could I possibly say that would change their mind when they've already made a decision to take nothing from the interpretation we provided and to say the words that they did. The exhibit that really provoked strong reactions was actually a traveling exhibit from Denver Botanic Gardens. It was La Calavera Katrina. And it was beautiful. And I knew that it might not be to everyone's taste, because what art is, I didn't think that the guests who didn't like it would be quite so proactive when it came to sharing their opinions. For the most part, these opinions didn't warrant a response. So if it was social media or an email or voicemail, it's like, okay, it just gets lost in the void with everyone else's comments. But when it was tricky was when these people were in your face. And the best we could say was, our charge is to connect people with plants. And we do that in lots of different ways. And this is one of those different ways. There's lots of different people, with a lot of different interests. We're also a garden for all, and we're going to share and celebrate other cultures. And that's about all we could do. And I think what we could do better in the future is just training our frontline staff. So our education team and ticketing and Café, I think they're the ones who hear people's opinions on just how to deflect criticism. And I have to emphasize that it's really a very small proportion of overall visitors. It's just that it sounds so loud, especially when it's right in front of you. And so one thing that we did do was really celebrate and share our successes and individual stories of visitor impact, people who were deeply moved by what we put on or had some sort of connection with it, and share that wildly to counterbalance the negative. Because like you said, a lot fewer people take the time to send you positive feedback. So we had to make an extra effort to share the positive feedback when we did hear it.
All right, thank you, Britt. Kim, could you also tell us about how you've handled criticism during some of your engagement work?
Sure. Bottom line, criticism isn't always easy to receive. I mean, when it's offered in kindness, then it's a lot easier to, it's much more palatable. I think, to Britt's point, not every bit of criticism will warrant a response. I'll offer two different perspectives. One is, I think you tend to learn a lot through criticism. And if you apply a lens of wanting to continuously improve the work that you're doing, it does feel different. You can perhaps work hard at developing a discipline to separate some of the emotion from the actual input and feedback that you're receiving, and finding ways to actually build that into your system and into your decisions, to use that criticism as a valuable opportunity to learn and think about the work that you do from a different lens. There's so much pride of ownership. We're all committed to what we do. There's pride of ownership in developing and putting things together and executing those. And sometimes you lose perspective, and you don't always have the same perspective. You won't always have the same perspective as others who are going to be experiencing things. So it's an opportunity to learn. From a how do you respond to it, I think where I have found the most success is being able to lean into responding with kindness and gratitude. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. You are helping us make our garden better in the future, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your perspective with me. And leaving it at that. I think that's different than feeling the need to defend or give reasons, because that's not always what the person speaking to you about is looking for. They're looking to be heard. They want to share their perspective. And often, again, it's really intended to be productive. So, thanking them, being kind, helping them to know that they're welcome to share feedback like this and welcome back to your garden is really important. The other lens I will share briefly is just that creating an organization, creating an environment that's welcoming and intends to be welcoming of all can also have the impact that some don't feel welcome because you have chosen to welcome others. It's a very hard statement to make and have it be articulated well. I'll give you an example. We invited in the Gay Men's Chorus to perform at an event that we had, and we got some feedback from an attendee that they won't be coming back because they didn't appreciate that we welcomed in this choir. And while I understand that, our objective is to welcome all. If as a result of that they don't feel welcome, that's part of what we have to accept and understand, and then weigh how we're going to weigh those kinds of realities into our decision making. So a couple of perspectives, no right or wrong answer.
Thank you, Kim. All right, before we get to Q&A, I have one final question. And this is the time I really would like all of you just kind of leave everyone with some advice as far as when it comes to our community engagement journeys, what's one piece of advice you'd like to give people? Sarah, if we could start with you, please.
Sure. I just like to emphasize that through the experiences that I've shared, I really feel that engaging with members of the community you want to reach out to co-create it right from the beginning. Right from the beginning is the key point. Just engaging people in the early planning stages so they feel ownership over it and can really, provide good advice and also make it mutually beneficial. But engage from the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Britt.
Yeah, I think probably be patient because it's going to get messy probably at times. And so just be open to new ideas and give people a lot of grace. But just it's just a lot of these, things, the future that we want to see doesn't happen overnight. So it does take time.
Thank you. Surbhi?
Yeah, I just want to echo Britt's sentiment about being patient. It definitely, don't get discouraged if things don't work the first time. It takes time to build trust within the community. And even now, for our program that's been around for 8 years, it's not uncommon to see a 50% no-show rate or higher. But what we've seen over the years is that with each consecutive program visit, that number gets lower and lower. So don't get discouraged and be patient.
Thank you, Surbhi. Kim?
I think it's really important to know why you're doing what you're doing. Know your why. It's really, really important. And know that that why is going to change as you navigate the journey that this work is. It's a journey. It's not going to be something that you ever finish. The other thing I'll offer is, and this has been referenced a couple of times, give yourselves the credit for the progress you're making. It's really hard sometimes to remember where you were after you've made the progress. But I do think that, reminding yourselves the work that you've done, the work that you've put in, even if it's baby steps, they do accumulate and you're in a different spot than you used to be. And I think it's important to give yourselves credit for the effort, the work, the intention that goes into making those baby steps forward.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, that makes me think of we had our Celebración de los Árboles event a few weeks ago, and it's our second year doing it, the first time doing it for the whole weekend. And I at first was focused on the fact that, oh man, we've got rain this whole weekend. But there was still a ton of people out that Saturday. And when I showed up on site and my son's with me, he looked around and he said, "This is the most Latinos I've ever seen here before." And for a 14-year-old, that's the first thing he noticed. I was trying not to cry when he's saying it, because I'm like, man, took his perspective just to realize the great, not even focusing on the ring, and to see that, and for him to feel so proud of his culture and to see that, it's really great, because it was that perspective that we hope a lot of the communities we're welcoming see as well. So thank you so much for all your time. And now we're going to get into the Q&A. I see we have about 5 questions that have come in here. First one looks like this would be talking about the free memberships. So I know we've got the Museums for All. Maybe not everybody is familiar with Museums for All. So what's the criteria that is used for the free memberships?
So I'll jump in on that. Museums for All general admission program is based on EBT and SNAP benefit card, WIC enrollment, benefits programs like that. And we simply applied that same rule with the added caveat that the free membership would be granted to Iowa residents. We did find ourselves in a situation where we had some out-of-state Museums for All admissions, and our staff came back and said, "We never talked about this. Do we offer it to anyone?" And we did make the decision to keep it to Iowa residents. So we're really just kind of trying to continue that Museums for All notion and extend that full membership benefit to everybody. Again, we're new in this, we're in year 2. So as we learn, some of those eligibility criteria may be massaged a bit. I can't predict the future when it comes to that, but that's possible.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So I know most of you answered the question before, but the question was, what gardens on the panel have a dedicated DEI staff person? Was that, I know.
We do not. In Des Moines, we do not. I will say we have, within the last 6 to 9 months, can't remember the timing specifically, we've started a staff DEI committee that's focused on all of this work, but we do not have a dedicated employee.
And I believe it was the same as some of the other answers, that all the other gardens were similar. Okay, thank you. Now, the next question is, how do you champion and reinforce that DEI work as a part of everyone's role at your garden? And then it says, especially hort staff.
I can jump in a little bit on this one. Like I said, it's still a work in progress with us, but something Sarah talked about as speaker, she talked about Kola B. Talkins. She also came here and she did a lunch and learn for all of our staff. And as enrichment opportunities have come about, especially we've only done a couple. We had a really disruptive event happen down here last year. So I feel like we get things started and then something disruptive happens and we start over again. But as we have speakers available, that's something that all staff is invited and encouraged to attend. And so I think that is one start. And then also, I'll put her name in the chat. I saw that come through. But the other part too is something that Surbhi had said earlier too. It's kind of got me thinking about IDEA and how we think about it versus it being its own separate initiative versus being a part of everything that you do. And I think that's really important if you have people at the table in different conversations, different meetings who can kind of help put that lens out there on the table to think about, like for us, it might be designing some new part of a garden and thinking about physical access in a way that maybe hasn't been natural for us before. It's like we don't have all the answers, certainly, but this is a couple of things that have been working here.
Great. Thank you, Britt. So, Surbhi, would you mind just kind of answering that as well? Because I know with Denver is similar to what we're going through actually with the Arboretum. We are our goal is really that my role will actually now be director of community engagement, but we're looking at similarly to, I know, to how you in Denver look at it, that is institutional wide. How do you see that playing out now that it's been there for a while, that it's been that view on idea work?
Sorry, I didn't understand was it that if we have a staff member and how we
well, no, the fact that you don't have it, so it's that idea then that because you don't have that role, it's everybody is expected to reinforce the importance of the EI or IDA work at the garden.
Yeah, we do have, since the Idea Center is housed here, so, we have Nayland Plummer as a resource, of course, but I think just the fact that it is so interwoven within our mission and our values, it's something that we're always asking ourselves. I appreciate the question asked specifically about horticulture staff members, because we totally understand there's so many staff members who they're not at a computer all day, they're out in the garden, and they may not have an opportunity to sit through a lunch and learn or other like training opportunities. And so I think that self-reflection question that I mentioned earlier really encourages people to participate in, find the time to participate in trainings and get involved, especially when they're in roles that may not traditionally involve that work. It's a little bit of an encouragement. Oh, you're muted.
So we have a question about asking if anyone in the panel could talk to about success in engaging diverse communities through social media channels, and have there been successes but also missteps through that? I can, I can talk, I can answer that if you don't mind me jumping in. But one of the things that I worked on a few years ago was creating a social media days of acknowledgement, which was a way for us to acknowledge important social days that are important to many different communities, but that we may not have had on our radar. Outside of your typical days where everyone's kind of put something for us, for Arbor Day, or for some of the other major holidays, but as a way to then recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, or if we're looking at Black History Month, that we then find a way to reach out. And one of the things that I've noticed is that we had, and we've had few people have told me, like, hey, I saw this post, or at our illumination event, which we have during November, December, which is our holiday lights exhibition. I had friends who went to that later said, I saw the difference you had with the music or with the lights. I felt really included and seen, and it was great. And I think a lot of people don't understand that it doesn't take a lot. It could take a one sentence social media post, and someone could see that and just feel like they feel seen. That when you're not used to being seen, you're not used to having your holidays recognized, it doesn't take a lot of effort for us to do that. And for someone to really see that and feel welcome and feel like, wow, they went out of their way to do that. I might go out there and visit now. I really appreciate that. And of course, missteps, I think we've probably all got plenty of those that we've seen in the past. But one of the questions, I believe, it disappeared. I think, Surbhi, you might have answered already. It was about the grant that you had mentioned. So I think
I did. It just disappeared. I put that link in there. I don't know if everyone can see it, but I'm happy to share that.
So I'll go to the next one. What are some ways to integrate IDEA for gardens wanting to improve, but worried about too much IDEA interfering with funding, donors, or the general works of the garden?
So I can address a Florida-shaped elephant in the room. This is a really great question, because something we've talked a bit. Our political climate here has changed quite a bit in the last 2 years. And we're still doing this work, but we're not putting a label on it, I guess you could say. We're not saying this is our IDEA work, because I mean, personally, I'm speaking for myself and not the organization right now, but I do worry about drawing too much attention and making us a target, because my team is out, with the public. And so we have to be careful. We can do the work, I think, without, putting a label on it. So it's quietly, it's an approach to how we do our work, and people don't even realize it, I think, sometimes, that you are doing IDA work when you are maybe not labeling it as such.
Okay, thank you, Britt. Did anyone else have something you wanted to add for that? I've often said, oh, Surbhi, please.
Yeah, I just want to share that. I mean, I feel like going forward, younger people are looking to spend their money with organizations who are doing this kind of work. So I understand that there's kind of this balance between not wanting to upset, existing donors and being too vocal about certain initiatives. But I think I really think about our value of relevance, and that, in order to continue to be an organization in the community, that we have to center this work.
Yeah, thank you, Surbhi. And from what we see from the research as well, people are a lot more likely now to go to employers and workplaces that they feel represent them as well. People are a lot more likely to bring their authentic self to work, whereas in the past, I think we've been told very often, put your head down, do your work, and don't talk about your private life at all. Don't bring it to work. Well, I think we all realize that's quite impossible. So, one thing I've told people before is we may get a few negative responses to a program, but we have no idea from that how many people we may gain as potential attendees, as potential members, as potential donors. So I think a lot of times spend that time in the fearful area where we think we might lose money, we might lose people, but not thinking about who we might gain instead. So there's a question directly for you about the membership, about how do you cover the cost of the free memberships? Is it a grant? Is it donors?
At this point, since we're applying the same kind of premise as Museums for All through admission, we haven't gone into the decision-making to extend the membership benefits, worried primarily about how we're going to pay for it. Because, again, we're already doing the free admission, and they can come every day of the year and get 4 people in with their Museums for All. We're still somewhat new into this endeavor. So there's some data that we are beginning to pull together to see if there are costs outside of that Museums for All general admission model that we're already committed to. So more to come on that. In addition, we are using this as an example of reduction of barriers in grant applications. We're absolutely talking about this work to funders, and some of those are responding in ways that are likely going to result in some funding that could offset the expenses we expect there to be. But funding was not our primary why. I'll go back to what was your why. Our why was, how do we have within our power the opportunity to make one's experience more dignified? And the answer to that was yes. And we were willing to take that step forward without having all the answers.
Can I jump in on this one too?
Of course.
We also have a free membership program. We launched in 2019. Similar, just to emphasize how important this was when we were discussing it, we modeled it after Museums for All. But when we talked with United Way and their subsidiary agencies, everyone felt squicky about, and that's the only way to describe it, about asking visitors to bring out their EBT cards. And so that's why we developed the membership program, much like Kim said. So as far as something that's really important, I think, about these programs is that to remember is that this audience was not visiting. They're not taking anything away. So our this free membership program, it is free. There are no costs as far as we're concerned. And when they're here, they're also like, they're probably going to buy something in the gift shop. They might buy something in the cafe too, but they were not coming at all prior to this. So as far as we're concerned, there isn't really a cost associated with it, but it is immensely fundable. Everybody wants to support something like this.
Yeah, Britt, we brought some experience sampling visitors a few years ago when we were doing community needs and assets study. And I know the belief could be, well, you're bringing people for free or getting free entrance. And it turned out one of those people purchased a family membership because they enjoyed it so much. A few people went to the gift shop. A few people went to the cafe. So, you can't always quantify the extra money that is actually, is really spent. So next question is, we have time for, we can do two more, the last two on here. Have any gardens led efforts to provide education about local indigenous groups?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
There's a lot of advantages to being a garden associated with a major university like Cornell, because they have an American Indian Indigenous Studies program in which the faculty and staff that support that program have been engaging with the local indigenous communities for a long time. Like many other communities in North America and around the world right now, there's definitely been a huge effort to preserve languages. And so Cornell has been really supporting the local Haudenosaunee nations with support to continue to preserve their languages. And one way in which we've played a role is that we've been working with the local traditional, one of the Haudenosaunee nations is the Gayokono, and their traditional homelands are where our gardens in Cornell is now. And for the first time since they've left the area forcibly a few hundred years ago, they asked if they could plant seeds from heritage plants that they have been growing since that time. And they came to our gardens and planted them in our gardens for the first time since their people have been driven out in the 1700s. And that resulted in a very powerful collaboration where we have worked with them to create interpretive panels to explain the story behind each of these heritage plants that are very significant to their creation story. And they lead a group of people through this program called the Gayokono Learning Project, where people can sign up and learn culture and heritage. And we're one of many places that they go to recount their cultural heritage and their connection to this land. The most powerful part about it is that up until the last few years, Gayokono people haven't engaged in learning about their culture on the land in which their culture has been developed. So that's been an extremely powerful program that we can be a part of through growing and safeguarding and keeping safe the plants that are near and dear to them, and giving them the seeds back every year after they're grown so that they can continue to grow them and give us seeds once again to grow in order to educate the public about their history that's alive and well and is continuing to thrive through these programs.
Thank you for that, Sarah. So we have a couple minutes left. We have one more question. For those with DEIA or IDA staff boards, committees, how does your board maintain communication with and include the perspectives of staff members who are not on the board or not able to be involved?
We do, but at Denver Botanic, we do have some staff members that are also a part of the board idea committee. And so there's kind of that open line of communication there.
Just to clarify, our idea committee is staff. It's staff only at this moment. It's still relatively new in its infancy. It is not a committee of the board.
Okay. That does it for our questions. Are there any others any final thoughts anyone would like to share? No? Well, as I see it often in meetings and people love to do, we give a few minutes back to people. I want to thank the panelists so much for giving your time today and for being a part of this panel today. And thank you so much for all your answers. And we will also, this is also available on the website, so it was recorded. So if you want to share with any colleagues, please do so. And Brianna, I'll pass over if there's anything else you wanted to say.
Thanks, everyone. Wonderful job facilitating today. And thank you to all our wonderful panelists. We really appreciate your perspectives.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.